My name is Margaret and I am 75 years old. I never thought life would bring me to the point where I would find myself lying on cold concrete under a bridge, with nothing but a thin blanket and the sound of passing cars above my head. But that is exactly where I ended up. My children, the very people I raised and loved with all my heart, had abandoned me when I needed them the most. And as I lay there one rainy evening, shivering and trying to keep my tears from falling, I suddenly heard a voice I hadn't heard in many years. "Margaret! Oh my God, is that you?" The loud noise came from the other side of the bridge. A group of young men were shouting, their laughter sharp and wild in the night air. They had been drinking, bottles clinking as they stumbled closer. My sister froze, clutching her purse. My heart pounded, because I knew what could happen when drunk men spotted a homeless old woman. One of them noticed us. "Hey, what's going on there?" he called out. His voice was mocking and my body stiffened. They started walking toward us, three of them, their footsteps heavy. I tried to pull the cup of tea nearly slipped from my trembling hands. My daughter Susan, the girl I carried in my arms, the child whose fever I stayed up all night to nurse, the young woman I once believed would take care of me in my old age, was laughing with the very man who had stolen the check. My heart twisted inside me. I blinked, hoping my tired eyes were playing tricks. But no, it was her. Her hair was tied neatly, her clothes looked new, her hands polished with fresh rings. She looked happy, too happy. And the man beside her. He leaned close, whispering into her ear, his hand sliding across the table to touch hers. Elizabeth noticed That night I could not sleep. Even though Elizabeth gave me the softest bed in her mansion, my mind kept replaying the scene at the cafe. The shredded check, Susan's cold eyes, and the thief's mocking laugh. Every tear that fell onto my pillow carried both pain and disbelief. How had I ended up here? How had my own daughter turned against me? I woke before dawn and wandered to the balcony. The city lights glowed faintly, and the air was cool. Elizabeth joined me, wrapped in a silk robe. For a moment the world seemed to stop. The car door stood open, my daughter sitting inside, her eyes begging, her lips trembling. Behind her, in the shadows, I could make out Anthony Russo. His sharp jawline, his cold stare, and the faint smirk on his lips made my blood run cold. Elizabeth squeezed my hand. "Don't do it," she whispered. "It's a trap." But Susan's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Mom, please. If you love me, get in." My heart twisted. How could I refuse my child? Even after all the pain, even after the betrayal, she was still my daughter. I took a shaky step forward, but Elizabeth pulled me back sharply. "Margaret, listen to me. This man doesn't care about you or Susan. Once you get in that car, there's no guarantee you'll come out." The door creaked open, and there stood Elizabeth, dressed not in her glamorous gowns but in black slacks and a simple jacket. Her hair was tied back, her face fierce and determined. Behind her, two police officers gripped their weapons, their flashlights slicing through the dark room. "Margaret," Elizabeth breathed, her eyes softening for just a moment. "I told you I wouldn't let this be the end." I nearly collapsed with relief. Susan clung to me, whispering, "Aunt Elizabeth." Her voice was barely a squeak. But there was no time for tears. Behind us, heavy footsteps thundered down the hall. Russo's voice boomed. "You think you can walk in here and take them from me? This is my world, Elizabeth." The blast rattled my bones, the warehouse groaning as if it would collapse. Flames licked the far wall, smoke billowing through the cracks. The police officers shouted into their radios, calling for backup, their voices strained with urgency. Elizabeth gripped my arm, dragging both me and Susan toward the back exit. "Move," she yelled. My legs felt like lead, but somehow I forced them to obey. Susan stumbled beside me, coughing as the smoke thickened. Behind us, the echo of laughter cut through the chaos. My blood froze. It wasn't Russo's voice. He had been taken away in cuffs. This was someone else. A deeper, darker voice. From the shadows, a figure emerged. He was taller than Russo, broader, with a scar that ran across his cheek. His eyes glowed with cold hatred. "You think taking Russo down ends it," he sneered. "I'm the one who—" 4 days after the fire, I lived in constant fear. Every creak of the floorboards in Elizabeth's mansion, every shadow passing the window, made my heart leap. I barely slept, my mind replaying Victor's burning eyes. His voice dripping with threat. "This isn't over." Elizabeth refused to show fear. She was sharper than ever, meeting daily with lawyers and police. "We'll crush him before he touches this family again," she said firmly, but I knew her well enough to see the strain hiding behind her steady voice. Susan, on the other hand, was broken. She spent hours in her room, staring out the window, her once perfect hair in tangles. When I brought her food, she whispered, "Mom, how do you still love me after everything I did?" I would sit beside her, stroke her hand, and tell her, "Because you are mine. Nothing can change that." But Victor wasn't finished. One evening, as the sun set, Elizabeth's maid Angela rushed into the living room, her face pale. "Ma'am," she stammered, "someone left this at the gate." She held out. The ride felt endless. The car rattled down old country roads, the night pressing in like a heavy cloak. Susan wept silently beside me, while Elizabeth sat upright, her jaw set like stone. Victor rode in the front seat, humming an eerie tune as if none of this mattered. At last, the car stopped in front of an abandoned quarry. The headlights cut across jagged rocks and deep pits of shadow. Victor's men yanked us out, pushing us toward the edge. My knees wobbled, the gravel slipping beneath my shoes. "This place," Victor said, spreading his arms wide, "is where your story ends." His eyes gleamed with a cruel joy. Susan clung to me, sobbing, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." I cupped her face, ignoring the gun pointed at me. "You are my daughter. I forgave you the moment you left, even if you didn't know it. Don't ever forget that." Victor laughed. "Touching, truly. But it changes nothing." He signaled one of his men. "Do it." The man raised his gun. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. But before he could fire, a blinding floodlight exploded behind us. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Dozens of officers poured from vans, rifles trained on Victor and his men. Helicopter blades thundered above, the beam locking onto the quarry. The men froze, guns trembling in their hands. Victor snarled, "You think this stops me?" Elizabeth stepped forward, fearless, even with a weapon still pointed at her. "Yes, Victor. It stops here." Victor lunged for her, but the officers were faster. A shot rang out, not from Victor's gun but from a sniper above. His weapon clattered to the ground as he screamed, clutching his arm. The rest of his men dropped their guns, surrendering one by one. Susan collapsed to her knees, sobbing in relief. I wrapped my arms around her, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in years, I felt her heartbeat pressed to mine, and it gave me strength I